The information provided in this video is for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. It is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, psychiatrist, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have seen in this presentation. Imagine you're in the emergency room. The lights are too bright, the sounds are a chaotic blur, and you're not there for a broken arm or a spiking fever. You're there because your own mind feels like a foreign country. You're anxious, your thoughts are racing, or maybe you can't feel anything at all. A clinician in scrubs walks in, pulls up a chair, and looks at you with a calm, focused expression. They don't reach for a blood pressure cuff or a stethoscope. Instead, they ask you, "Can you tell me today's date?" Then, "Who is the current president?" And then, "I'm going to give you 3 words to remember. Apple, table, penny." Feels strange, almost ridiculously simple. You're in the middle of a crisis and they're giving you a pop quiz? What could remembering 3 random words possibly have to do with the storm raging inside your head? What if I told you that this seemingly random conversation is actually one of the most powerful, sophisticated, and essential tools in all of medicine? That in those 10 to 15 minutes, that clinician is building a detailed, high-resolution map of your brain's current functioning? This isn't just small talk. This is the mental status examination, or MSE. And by the end of this journey we're about to take, you will not only understand what it is, you will understand the profound purpose behind every single question, every observation, and every seemingly simple task. You'll see it not as a test to be passed or failed, but as a systematic way to make the invisible visible. This knowledge is your key to demystifying mental health care, whether you are a patient, a concerned family member, a student, or simply someone who wants to understand the human mind on a deeper level. So, what is the core purpose of a mental status exam? Let's get right to it. Think of it this way: the MSE is to a psychiatrist or a psychologist what a physical exam is to a primary care doctor. When you go to your doctor with a bad cough, they perform a series of checks. They listen to your lungs with a stethoscope. They take your temperature. They check your heart rate. They look in your throat. Each of these actions gathers a specific piece of objective data. A crackle in the lungs isn't just a vague feeling. It's a specific sound that points to a potential problem, like fluid. A fever isn't just feeling hot. It's a number on a thermometer that indicates infection or inflammation. The mind, however, presents a unique challenge. You can't put a stethoscope on a thought. You can't take the temperature of a mood. You can't run a lab test on someone's perception of reality. The contents of our mind, our thoughts, feelings, memories, and beliefs, are entirely internal and subjective. So how does a clinician bridge that gap? How do they turn your internal subjective experience into objective, useful data they can use to help you? That is the central, brilliant purpose of the mental status examination. It is a systematic process for observing and describing a patient's mental state right here, right now. It's not a biography of your entire life. It's not a personality test. It is a snapshot in time. A better analogy might be to call it a mental weather report. Is it sunny and clear in there? Is it foggy? Is there a thunderstorm on the horizon? The MSE provides the data to make that report, and it does so by looking at a series of distinct, observable categories. The ultimate goal isn't just to collect data for the sake of it. The purpose is fourfold, and this is the framework you need to understand. First, the MSE establishes a baseline. When a patient first comes in for help, the clinician has no idea what their normal is. The first MSE creates a detailed starting point. It documents how the person looks, acts, speaks, thinks, and feels on that specific day at that specific time. This baseline is incredibly valuable. Without it, it's impossible to know if a treatment is working, or if the person's condition is getting better or worse. It's like taking a before picture before you start a home renovation. You need to know where you started to appreciate how far you've come. Second, the MSE identifies specific signs and symptoms to help form a diagnosis. The different components of the exam are designed to probe different areas of brain function. Is the person's speech pattern pressured and rapid? That could point towards mania. Is their mood flat and constricted? That might suggest depression or schizophrenia. Are they hearing voices that aren't there? That's a sign of psychosis. The MSE doesn't give you the final diagnosis on its own, but it provides the critical puzzle pieces, the signs and symptoms, that the clinician uses, along with the patient's history, to arrive at an accurate diagnostic picture. It separates the signal from the noise. Third, the MSE allows a clinician to track changes over time. Remember the weather report analogy? Mental health isn't static. It changes. A person with bipolar disorder might be manic one week and severely depressed a month later. A patient recovering from a traumatic brain injury might show slow but steady improvement in their memory and concentration over several months. By performing brief, focused mental status exams at follow-up appointments, a clinician can monitor these changes objectively. They can see if a new medication is reducing auditory hallucinations, or if therapy is improving a patient's insight into their illness. This is how treatment is tailored and adjusted. It's data-driven care for the mind. And fourth, and this is absolutely critical in the American healthcare system, the MSE creates a standardized language. It provides a common framework for all healthcare professionals to communicate about a patient's mental state. When a psychiatrist in the emergency room performs an MSE and documents that a patient has linear and goal-directed thought processes, but displays a label effect, any other doctor, nurse, or therapist who reads that note knows exactly what that means. It's precise. It's efficient. It removes ambiguity. It ensures that as a patient moves from the ER to an inpatient unit to an outpatient clinic, their story and their clinical presentation are communicated clearly and consistently, ensuring continuity of care. It's the universal language of clinical mental health. So when that clinician is asking you to remember apple, table, penny, they aren't just testing your memory. They are gathering a crucial data point for the cognition part of their exam. When they are observing if you're making eye contact or fidgeting in your seat, they are collecting data on behavior and psychomotor activity. When they listen to the speed, rhythm, and volume of your speech, they are assessing the speech component. Nothing is random. Every observation, every question, has a clear and deliberate purpose. It's all part of a larger, elegant system designed to understand the most complex thing in the known universe, the human mind. Over the course of this series, we are going to break that system down. We're going to go through the MSE domain by domain. We'll start with the very first thing a clinician notices, appearance and behavior. Then we'll move into speech. We'll explore the vast and nuanced worlds of mood and affect. And yes, we'll explain the critical difference between the two. We'll dive deep into the most complex part, thought process and thought content. We'll demystify the assessment of perception, where things like hallucinations and illusions live. We'll cover cognition, the part with the memory tests and counting backwards from 100. And finally, we'll tackle two of the most important predictors of a patient's outcome, their insight and their judgment. This isn't just academic. This is practical, empowering knowledge. Understanding this process removes the fear of the unknown. It allows you to see the logic and care behind the questions. It gives you the vocabulary to better describe your own experiences and to better understand the experiences of those you care about. This is your guide to the foundational assessment of mental health. It's the map of the mind, and we're about to learn how to read it together. So let's begin our journey with the very first thing a clinician does, often before a single word is spoken. This is the art of observation. Think of a seasoned detective arriving at a scene. They don't immediately start interrogating witnesses. They pause. They look. They absorb the environment. They notice the overturned chair, the papers scattered on the floor, the clock stopped at a specific time. These are all objective data points, clues that begin to tell a story. In mental health, this initial scan of the scene is broken down into three core components: appearance, behavior, and attitude. Let's start with appearance. Now, right away, our brains might jump to judgment. We're wired to make snap assessments based on how people look. But in a mental status exam, this isn't about fashion or social judgment. It's about clinical information. It's about looking for changes from a person's baseline and what those changes might signify. We're looking for clues to their internal world, written on the outside. One of the first things a clinician notes is hygiene and grooming. A person who comes in with unwashed hair, body odor, and stained clothes might be sending a powerful nonverbal signal. If this person has a history of being meticulous about their appearance, this change is a massive red flag. It could suggest a profound depression, where the energy and motivation required for self-care, something most of us take for granted, has completely vanished. The simple act of taking a shower can feel like climbing Mount Everest. It could also point to a psychotic process, where the person's reality is so disorganized that personal hygiene is no longer a priority, or even a concept they can engage with. Conversely, someone in a manic state might appear flamboyant or disheveled in a different way, perhaps wearing mismatched, brightly colored clothing, with excessive makeup applied hastily. The clue isn't the style itself but the context and the change. Next is how a person is dressed. Is it appropriate for the weather and the situation? This gives us a window into their judgment and their connection to reality. A person wearing a heavy winter coat and a wool hat in the middle of a scorching July afternoon isn't making a fashion statement. It could indicate a profound disturbance in their ability to perceive their environment correctly, possibly due to psychosis, dementia, or a delirium caused by a medical issue. Their internal thermostat is broken, or their brain is misinterpreting the signals from the outside world. It's a piece of data that says, something is off with this person's ability to process basic reality. We also observe physical characteristics. Are they significantly underweight or overweight? This isn't about body shaming. It could be a clue to an eating disorder, or the profound appetite changes that come with depression or side effects from medication. Are there visible scars on their arms? This could be evidence of self-harm, a critical piece of information for assessing risk. Are their pupils pinpoint or widely dilated? This might suggest substance use. Each observation is another piece of the puzzle, another sentence in the story of what this person is experiencing. Appearance is the cover of the book. It doesn't tell you the whole story, but it gives you the title, the genre, and a powerful first impression of the narrative inside. From the static image of appearance, we move to the motion picture of behavior and psychomotor activity. Psychomotor is just a clinical term for how our mind, our psyche, expresses itself through physical movement, our motor system. This is about how someone moves, their posture, their gestures. Imagine someone sitting rigidly on the edge of their chair, wringing their hands, their eyes darting around the room. They can't stop bouncing their knee. This is psychomotor agitation. It's the physical manifestation of intense internal anxiety or turmoil. It's like their body is screaming even if their voice is silent. Their mind is racing and their body is trying to keep up. This is common in severe anxiety, mania, or substance withdrawal. Now picture the opposite. A person slumped deep into their chair, as if their bones are too heavy for their muscles to support. They move incredibly slowly. When they reach for a glass of water, it looks like they're moving through thick molasses. Their face is a mask showing no expression. This is psychomotor retardation or slowing. It's a hallmark sign of severe depression. The brakes have been slammed on their entire system. The mind is moving slowly, weighed down by depressive thoughts, and the body follows suit. The energy required for normal movement has been completely depleted. Beyond the speed of movement, we look for any unusual or involuntary actions. Does the person have a tremor? Is it a fine, rapid tremor in their hands which could suggest anxiety or caffeine use? Or is it a coarse, pill-rolling tremor, which might be a side effect of certain psychiatric medications or a sign of Parkinson's disease? Are there tics, sudden, repetitive, non-rhythmic movements or vocalizations, like a shoulder shrug or a throat-clearing sound? This could point towards Tourette's syndrome or another tic disorder. We also look for things like stereotypies, which are repetitive, purposeless movements like rocking back and forth or flapping hands. These are often associated with autism spectrum disorder or severe institutionalization. Each movement or lack thereof adds another layer of detail to the clinical picture. Finally, in this initial observation phase, we assess attitude toward the examiner. This isn't about whether the clinician likes the person or vice versa. It's a crucial assessment of how the person relates to others, to authority, and to the situation they are in. The clinician will describe the person's attitude on a spectrum. Are they cooperative and engaged, leaning forward, making good eye contact? This suggests a level of trust and a willingness to participate in the process. Or are they guarded and suspicious? Do they answer questions with other questions? Do they seem to believe the clinician has a hidden agenda? This could be a sign of paranoia, a core feature of some psychotic illnesses. It could also be the result of past trauma, where trusting people in authority has led to pain. It's a defense mechanism. Their mind is telling them, be careful. This is not safe. Perhaps their attitude is hostile and irritable. They might be sarcastic, demeaning, or openly angry. This isn't just them being a difficult person. This irritability could be a symptom of mania, where frustration tolerance is incredibly low. It could be part of a personality disorder, or it could be the understandable anger of someone who feels trapped by their illness or forced into treatment against their will. Then there's the other end of the spectrum, apathetic. The person seems completely disinterested, not just in the clinician but in the entire process. Their answers are short. Their gaze is distant. They don't seem to care what happens. This isn't laziness. This profound apathy can be a devastating symptom of certain types of depression, schizophrenia, or a frontal lobe brain injury. It's a sign that the part of the brain responsible for motivation for caring for oomph has gone offline. By combining these three elements, appearance, behavior, and attitude, the clinician has already gathered a wealth of information before the deep dive into the person's thoughts and feelings even begins. They've observed the clues. They've seen how the person's internal state is manifesting physically and interpersonally. They've read the cover of the book and watched the opening scene. They have a framework. Now, and only now, is it time to start listening to the words themselves, to analyze the very fabric of communication, their speech. This analysis of speech isn't about judging someone's accent or their vocabulary. It's about listening to the music behind the words. Think of it this way: the content of what someone says, the actual story they tell, is the lyrics of a song. But the speech pattern, the rate, the rhythm, the volume, that's the melody, the harmony, and the tempo. And a skilled clinician knows that sometimes, the music tells you more about the composer's state of mind than the lyrics ever could. Let's start with the most obvious element. Rate. How fast is the person talking? On one end of the spectrum, you have what's called pressured speech. This isn't just talking fast like an excited teenager or a fast-talking salesman. Pressured speech is a relentless, unstoppable torrent of words. It feels like it's being propelled by an internal engine that's stuck in overdrive. The person talks so quickly and with such force that it's difficult, sometimes impossible, for the listener to interrupt. It's like trying to stop a fire hose with your bare hands. This is a classic sign often associated with a manic episode in bipolar disorder, but it can also be seen in severe anxiety or intoxication with stimulants. The sheer velocity of the words suggests that the thoughts underneath are racing just as fast, tumbling over one another in a desperate sprint to get out. On the complete opposite end is slowed or latency of speech. Here, the words don't flow, they crawl. There are long, agonizing pauses between words, or before answering a simple question. It can feel like you're watching someone physically wade through thick mud just to form a sentence. Each word seems to require an immense, draining effort. This is often a hallmark of severe depression, where the psychomotor slowing that affects the body also affects the mechanics of speech. It can also be seen in some forms of psychosis or in certain neurological conditions. When you're in the room with someone experiencing this, you feel the weight of their effort. You ask a question, and the silence that follows isn't a thoughtful pause. It's a heavy, empty space that you can almost feel them struggling to fill. Then there's the rhythm and cadence, the natural melody of language. Most of us speak with a certain prosody, our pitch goes up and down, we emphasize certain words, we have a natural ebb and flow. But what happens when that melody disappears? You get what's called monotonic speech. The words come out on a single, flat, unchanging note. It's devoid of emotional color. Imagine a beautiful, vibrant painting suddenly rendered in shades of gray. That's what monotonic speech does to communication. It strips the feeling out of the words, leaving behind a hollow shell. This is often associated with the negative symptoms of schizophrenia, profound depression, or even conditions like Parkinson's disease. The person might be saying, "I'm so excited about this." But if it's delivered in a flat monotone, the music is telling a very different story than the lyrics. Volume is another critical piece of the puzzle. Is the person speaking in a booming, expansive voice that fills the entire room, regardless of the social context? This can signal mania, agitation, or even just a lack of insight into social boundaries. Or is their speech barely a whisper? Do you have to lean in to hear them? Soft, hesitant speech can be a sign of anxiety, shyness, or low self-esteem. It can also be a feature of paranoia, where the person speaks quietly as if they're afraid of being overheard. The volume is a direct indicator of the person's internal energy level and their sense of safety in the world. And of course, there's quantity. Is the person talkative, or are they completely taciturn? Someone who is logorrheic is excessively wordy, talking so much that it's hard to follow a single train of thought. This often goes hand in hand with the pressured speech of mania. The opposite is poverty of speech, or alogia. This is more than just being quiet. It's when a person gives brief, empty, one-word replies to open-ended questions. You ask, "How have you been feeling this week?" And the answer is just, "Fine." You try to probe further. "What was the best part of your week?" The answer, "Nothing." There's no spontaneous elaboration. It's as if the well of words has run dry. This is another one of those negative symptoms often seen in schizophrenia, where the illness seems to rob the person of the ability to generate thought and speech. Let's put this together with a tale of two patients. Imagine a clinician first meets Sarah. The moment the clinician says hello, Sarah launches into a breathless, high-volume monologue. She talks at 100 miles an hour, her words tumbling over each other about her brilliant new business plan, then about a fight she had with a barista, then about the political state of the nation, all without taking a breath. The clinician tries to ask a question, but Sarah either doesn't hear or simply talks over them, carried away by the sheer momentum of her own speech. The music here is frantic, loud, and chaotic. It's a symphony of mania. An hour later, the same clinician meets David. The clinician asks, "David, can you tell me what brought you in today?" A long, heavy silence hangs in the air. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. David looks down at his hands, his face a mask of exhaustion. Finally, in a voice that is barely audible, a flat, colorless whisper, he says, "Don't. No." The clinician waits, giving him space. After another long pause, David adds, "Tired." The effort to produce those two simple words seems to have completely drained him. The music here is a dirge. It's slow, quiet, and profoundly sad. It's the sound of severe depression. Notice, the clinician hasn't even gotten to the content of what Sarah or David is thinking. They haven't explored delusions or suicidal thoughts yet. But by simply listening to the music of their speech, the rate, the rhythm, the volume, the quantity, they already have a powerful hypothesis. Sarah's speech suggests a mind that is racing, expansive, and out of control. David's speech suggests a mind that is grinding to a halt under an immense weight. This is why the speech component of the mental status exam is so crucial. It's the bridge from the external to the internal. It's the first real clue we get about the person's inner world. Appearance and behavior show us how the person is navigating the physical world, but speech shows us how their mind is working, how their thoughts are being generated and transmitted. It's the delivery system for their entire internal reality. A problem with the delivery system, a speeding truck, a sputtering engine, a vehicle that won't start at all, tells you a tremendous amount about the state of the factory where the thoughts are being made. We've analyzed the vehicle. We've listened to the sound of their thoughts, the music of their mind. But is the music making sense? Is it following a logical progression? Or is it a chaotic, disjointed symphony full of jarring notes and bizarre transitions? To find out, we have to move beyond the sound and into the structure, into the very architecture of thinking itself. We have to examine the thought process. To find out, we have to move beyond the sound and into the structure, into the very architecture of thinking itself. We have to examine the thought process. Imagine your thoughts aren't just abstract ideas, but a journey, a road trip from point A to point B. Point A is a question someone asks you like, "How was your day?" Point B is your answer. For most of us, most of the time, this journey is pretty straightforward. We get on the mental highway, we follow the signs, and we arrive at our destination logically and efficiently. This is called a linear or goal-directed thought process. It's organized, it makes sense, and it's easy to follow. A clinician observing this would note that the connections between your thoughts are intact and logical. The car is running smoothly, and the GPS is working perfectly. But what if the journey isn't a straight line? What if you ask someone, "How was your day?" and they begin by telling you about the interesting bird they saw outside their window that morning. Then they describe the bird's feathers, which reminds them of a hat their aunt wore to a wedding in 1998. They tell you all about that wedding, the terrible band, the dried chicken, and how their cousin spilled wine on the bride. After 10 minutes of winding detours and excessive, unnecessary detail, they finally circle back and say, "So yeah, because of all that, my day was pretty good." This is called a circumstantial thought process. It's like taking the most scenic route possible to get to the grocery store. They eventually arrive at point B, the answer, but they include a massive amount of irrelevant information along the way. The key here is that they do arrive. They don't lose sight of the original destination. Many people are circumstantial thinkers. It can be a personality trait, a sign of anxiety, or just the way someone likes to tell a story. In a clinical setting, it's a pattern to note, but it's not always a sign of a serious problem. It's a detour, not a breakdown. But what if they never get back to the original question? What if they start with the bird, go to the aunt's hat, then the wedding, then the cousin, and then they start talking about the cousin's new job as a software engineer, and then the future of artificial intelligence, and they never ever get back to telling you how their day was? This is a tangential thought process. The journey has gone off on a tangent, a side road that leads further and further away from the original highway. The connection to the original point is lost. They've forgotten the destination. Unlike the circumstantial thinker who eventually finds their way back, the tangential thinker is lost in the weeds. following a new path entirely. This is more clinically significant. It suggests the person's internal GPS is malfunctioning, unable to hold a course. Now let's turn up the speed. Dramatically, imagine the car isn't just taking a side road, it's a high-performance race car, jumping from one highway to another with barely a connection between them. The links are there, but they're flimsy and based on the most superficial things like the sound of words. You ask the person, "How are you feeling?" And they respond, "Feeling fine, fine wine, take it in on time." It's a crime the way the sun shines. This is called a flight of ideas. The thoughts are racing, moving so quickly that they can't be contained within a logical structure. The connections are often made through puns, rhymes, what we call clanging, or loose associations. One idea sparks another, which sparks a third in a rapid, dizzying chain reaction. This is a classic hallmark of a manic episode, like in bipolar disorder. The engine of the mind is redlining, running so fast and hot that it's about to fly apart. But what happens when the engine just stops? Mid-journey on the open road, the car just dies. No warning, no sputtering, just silence. A person is in the middle of telling you a story, right in the middle of a sentence, and they just stop. They go blank. The thought is gone. It's not that they forgot the word. The entire thought has vanished from their mind as if a switch was flipped. This is called thought blocking. After a few moments of silence, they might say, "What was I talking about?" Or start on a completely new topic. To the person experiencing it, it can be terrifying. It's the sudden, inexplicable interruption of their own consciousness. While it can happen with severe anxiety, it's often a very concerning sign associated with psychosis, particularly schizophrenia. It suggests a fundamental disruption in the very flow of thought itself. Then there's the opposite of a stalled engine. What about a car stuck in a roundabout, unable to exit? The person gets stuck on a single idea, a single phrase, or a single motor action and repeats it over and over again, regardless of the context. This is called perseveration. A clinician might ask, "What is your name?" And the person says, "David." Then the clinician asks, "Where do you live?" And the person again answers, "David." "What did you eat for breakfast?" "David." The mind's needle is stuck in a groove, replaying the same bit of information endlessly. It's not that they're being difficult. They are neurologically unable to shift gears to a new thought. This is often seen in conditions with cognitive impairment like dementia or certain types of brain injuries. Finally, we come to the most extreme and disorganized form of thought process. Imagine our road trip analogy completely breaks down. There is no car. There is no road. There are just random parts. A tire here, a steering wheel there, a radio antenna over there, scattered in a field with no connection to each other whatsoever. This is what's known as word salad, or schizophasia. The words themselves are real, but they are thrown together in a way that is completely incoherent, without any grammatical structure or logical meaning. Someone might say, "The blue ran fast over the hungry table because my foot is a question." It's a jumble of language that reflects a jumble of thought. It indicates a profound level of disorganization, a mind where the fundamental rules of language and logic have shattered. This is one of the most severe symptoms of a psychotic disorder. So why does a clinician spend so much time mapping these mental highways? Because the process of thinking is just as revealing, if not more so, than the content of the thoughts. It's not just about what a person says, it's about how they say it. The structure, the flow, the speed, and the coherence of their speech provide a direct window into the functioning of their brain. It's like a mechanic listening to an engine. A smooth hum tells you things are good. A clank, a stall, or a high-pitched whine tells you exactly where you need to look for the problem. Observing someone's thought process isn't about judging them for being a bad storyteller or for rambling. It's about recognizing patterns that are vital clues to their internal state. It's about understanding that a person who is tangential isn't being rude. They may be struggling to keep their thoughts on track. A person experiencing thought blocking isn't just being forgetful, they are having a frightening neurological event. By carefully observing this journey of thought, a clinician can differentiate between anxiety and mania, between dementia and psychosis. They are looking at the very architecture of cognition to see if the foundation is solid or if it's starting to crack. We've mapped the highways, the detours, the breakdowns, and the high-speed chases of the mind's GPS. We understand the how. But what about the what? What is the actual cargo being carried on these journeys? Because sometimes the most dangerous thing isn't a car that's broken down on the side of the road, it's what's locked in the trunk. And to understand that, we have to look at thought content. Thought content is the what. It's the inventory of the mind, If thought process was the vehicle, the make, the model, the speed, the way it swerves and stays in its lane, then thought content is what it's carrying. It's the passengers, the luggage, the secret compartments, the ticking packages. And when a clinician begins this part of the examination, they are essentially asking, what's in the car? What are you carrying with you on this journey? And they always start with the most dangerous cargo first. They have to check for explosives. This means asking about thoughts of harm, specifically harm to oneself or harm to others. This isn't a casual question. It's the most direct and arguably the most important part of the entire mental status exam, because the answer can literally be the difference between life and death. Let's start with suicide. A clinician will ask, have you had any thoughts of wanting to hurt yourself, or that you'd be better off dead? This question is a doorway. Depending on the answer, it opens up a whole series of other, more specific questions. If the person says yes, the follow-up isn't just, oh, okay. It's a structured investigation to determine the level of risk. First, is the ideation passive or active? Passive suicidal ideation is thinking, I wish I could just go to sleep and not wake up, or, I wish a bus would hit me. There's a wish for death, but no plan to bring it about. Active ideation is different. It's thinking, I am going to kill myself. It has intent. If the ideation is active, the investigation deepens. The clinician will ask about the plan. How would you do it? Do you have access to the means? When would you do it? The more detailed and specific the plan, the higher the risk. Someone who says, I don't know, maybe I'd take some pills someday, is at a different level of risk than someone who says, on Friday after my wife leaves for work, I'm going to take the shotgun from the hall closet, which I already have the ammunition for. That level of specificity is a 5-alarm fire. It tells the clinician that this isn't just a fleeting thought, it's a rehearsed plan of action. The same rigorous questioning applies to homicidal ideation, thoughts of harming someone else. Have you had any thoughts of hurting another person? If the answer is yes, the same ladder of inquiry begins. Who? Why? How? Do you have a plan? This is where the clinician's role expands beyond just helping the patient. It extends to protecting the public. There's a famous legal case in California, the Tarasoff case, that fundamentally changed the rules. A student told his university therapist that he intended to kill a young woman named Tatiana Tarasoff. The therapist notified the campus police, who briefly detained the student, but then released him because he seemed rational. The therapist's supervisor told him to take no further action. 2 months later, that student killed Tatiana Tarasoff. Her parents sued, and the court's decision established what is now known as the duty to protect, or duty to warn. It means that if a clinician believes a patient poses a real and imminent threat to a specific, identifiable person, they have a legal and ethical obligation to break confidentiality and warn that potential victim and the police. This is one of the heaviest responsibilities a mental health professional carries. They are trying to look inside the trunk of that car and determine if there is a credible threat, not just to the driver but to someone else on the road. Once these critical safety questions are addressed, the exploration of thought content moves into other territories. It moves from the explosives to the strange and unusual cargo. This is the realm of delusions. A delusion is not just a wrong idea. We all have wrong ideas. A delusion is a false belief that is fixed, firm, and unshakable, even in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. It's a belief that is not shared by others in that person's culture or subculture. If your entire community believes that a certain ritual will bring rain, that's a cultural belief, not a delusion. But if you, and only you, believe that you can personally control the weather by blinking in Morse code at the sun, that's leaning into delusional territory. The key is the fixity. You could present a person with a mountain of evidence, scientific papers, expert testimony, video proof, and it will not change their mind. Their belief is the foundation of their reality, and there are many different kinds of these foundational beliefs. The most common are persecutory delusions. This is the belief that you are being followed, harassed, cheated, poisoned, or conspired against. It's the feeling that they're out to get you. This isn't just general anxiety. It's a specific conviction. My neighbor is a government agent who is beaming microwaves into my apartment to control my thoughts. Then there are grandiose delusions. This is the belief that you have exceptional abilities, wealth, or fame. I am the secret advisor to the president, and I wrote all of his most famous speeches. Or the belief that you have a special relationship with a deity or are a famous person. Somatic delusions are false beliefs about your body. My intestines have been replaced by snakes. Or, there are parasites crawling under my skin. No amount of negative medical tests can convince the person otherwise. There are delusions of reference, where a person believes that insignificant remarks or events in the environment are directed at them. The news anchor on TV pauses for a moment, and the person with this delusion knows it's a secret message meant only for them. Two strangers laughing across the street? They're laughing about you. And then we get into some of the most profound and reality-bending delusions, often associated with schizophrenia, known as bizarre delusions. These are things like thought withdrawal, the belief that your thoughts have been taken out of your mind by some outside force. Thought insertion, the belief that thoughts are being placed into your mind that are not your own. Or thought broadcasting, the terrifying belief that your private thoughts are being broadcast out loud so that everyone around you can hear them. Imagine the horror of that experience. There is no privacy, no sanctuary, not even within your own mind. Now, it's crucial to distinguish delusions from something else that can occupy the mind. Obsessions. An obsession is a recurrent, persistent, and intrusive thought or urge that causes significant anxiety or distress. The person doesn't want to have the thought. They often recognize it as irrational, a product of their own mind, but they can't get rid of it. This is the hallmark of obsessive-compulsive disorder, or OCD. Someone with an obsession about contamination doesn't have a delusion that they are covered in germs. They have an intrusive, terrifying thought that they might be, and they can't shake the uncertainty and fear, which drives them to perform compulsions, like washing their hands hundreds of times. The person with the delusion is certain. The person with the obsession is tormented by doubt. So you see, thought content is a vast landscape. It's a spectrum from the life-threatening, suicidal and homicidal plans, to the reality-altering delusions, to the intrusive and distressing obsessions. It's about cataloging the core beliefs and preoccupations that drive a person's behavior. It's about understanding the internal logic, even if that logic is built on a foundation that doesn't align with consensual reality. Because these thoughts, this cargo, determine the destination. If you believe the CIA is after you, you're going to live a very different life than if you believe you're a secret billionaire. Your thoughts dictate your actions, your emotions, your entire experience of the world. But what happens when it's not just the thoughts that are different? What happens when the very information coming into the mind is skewed? What happens when the cargo in the trunk starts to whisper? What happens when you start seeing things in the rearview mirror that aren't actually there? To understand that, we have to move beyond what a person is thinking and look at what they are perceiving. This is the realm of perception. It's the difference between the map and the territory. Thought is the map, the internal plan, the beliefs, the ideas. Perception is the territory. It's the raw sensory data the world is feeding you second by second. It's the asphalt under the tires, the hum of the engine, the reflection in the glass. For most of us, most of the time, the map and the territory line up. The road we see is the road that's actually there. But in a mental status exam, the clinician is asking a crucial question. Is your windshield clear? Are your mirrors accurate? Or is your sensory equipment giving you faulty information? This exploration starts with a fundamental distinction, a fork in the road between two critical concepts, illusions and hallucinations. They sound similar, but they are worlds apart. An illusion is a misinterpretation of a real stimulus. There's something actually there, but your brain gets it wrong. Imagine you're driving at dusk and you see a crumpled black garbage bag on the side of the road. For a split second, your heart leaps into your throat because you perceive it as a small bear about to run into traffic. The stimulus, the bag, is real. Your perception of it is the illusion. It's a trick of the light, a product of fatigue, a brain taking a sensory shortcut. A hallucination, on the other hand, is a perception in the complete absence of a real stimulus. It's not misinterpreting the garbage bag. It's seeing a bear standing in the middle of an empty road where there is absolutely nothing. It is sensory data being generated from inside the brain, but experienced as if it were coming from the outside world. Feels completely, utterly real. This is not a trick of the light. This is the brain's projector playing a movie on the back of your eyes, or its sound system playing a track that only you can hear. And for the clinician, understanding the nature of these phantom perceptions is like being a detective at the scene of a crime that only the victim can see. The most common and often most distressing of these are auditory hallucinations. These aren't just the vague sense of hearing your name called in a quiet house. In a clinical context, they can be much more vivid and complex. They can be whispers or shouts, a single voice or a crowd of people talking. Sometimes they talk about the person, offering a running commentary on their actions, often critical. Look at him, he can't even pour a glass of water right. He's pathetic. Other times, the voices talk to the person, having a direct conversation. The most clinically significant and the most dangerous are command hallucinations. These are voices that issue orders. Pick up that rock. Step into the street. Hurt yourself. For the person experiencing this, it's not a suggestion. It can feel like an undeniable, authoritative command. Imagine driving your car, and suddenly a voice, as clear and real as mine is to you now, commands you to swerve into the oncoming lane. The internal struggle, the terror of that moment, is unimaginable. A clinician needs to know if this is happening. It's a 5-alarm fire for risk assessment. They'll ask questions like, do you ever hear things that other people don't? What do the voices say? Do they ever tell you to do things? The answers to these questions can mean the difference between a routine follow-up and an immediate hospitalization. Then we have visual hallucinations. This is the phantom in the rearview mirror. Like their auditory cousins, they exist on a spectrum. They can be simple and unformed, flashes of light, geometric patterns, shimmering distortions in the air. Or they can be incredibly complex and fully formed, seeing people who aren't there, animals walking through the room, or frightening figures lurking in the shadows. Think of the person in alcohol withdrawal, experiencing delirium tremens, convinced they're covered in spiders. Those spiders are not a metaphor. To them, they are a terrifying, tangible reality. The clinician is trying to understand the content. Are you seeing angels or demons? Lost loved ones or terrifying monsters? The content of the hallucination provides a window into the content of the person's mind. Their fears, their hopes, their turmoil. Beyond sight and sound, hallucinations can hijack any of the 5 senses. Olfactory hallucinations are the perception of smells that aren't there. Often they are unpleasant, the smell of burning rubber, rotting flesh, or poison. This can be particularly distressing, leading a person to believe their food is tainted or their house is filling with gas. Gustatory hallucinations are the same, but for taste. A persistent metallic or bitter taste in the mouth with no physical cause. These two are less common in primary psychiatric disorders like schizophrenia, and their presence can be a red flag for a clinician to consider neurological problems, like a seizure disorder or even a brain tumor. The phantom smell of burning toast is a classic, almost cliché, sign in neurology for a reason. Finally, there are tactile hallucinations, the sense of touch. This can be the feeling of insects crawling on or under the skin, a phenomenon called formication. It can be the sensation of being touched, pushed, or even electrified. This is a common and harrowing feature of stimulant-induced psychosis or withdrawal. The person isn't just paranoid. Their own skin feels like it's betraying them, crawling with invisible invaders. But the distortions of perception don't stop there. Sometimes it's not that the brain is adding phantom data. Sometimes it changes the quality of reality itself. This leads to 2 of the most bizarre and difficult to describe human experiences: depersonalization and derealization. Depersonalization is a profound sense of detachment from oneself. It's the feeling of being an outside observer of your own life. You are no longer the driver of the car. Instead, you feel like you're in the back seat, watching someone who looks like you go through the motions. Your own hands might feel like they don't belong to you. Your voice might sound distant and unfamiliar. You feel like a robot, an automaton, a character in a movie. The connection between your sense of self and your physical body has been frayed or even severed. It's an intensely alienating and frightening experience. Derealization is its twin. It's a sense of detachment from the outside world. The world around you no longer feels real. It might look flat, lifeless, like a movie set. Colors might seem washed out or strangely vivid. Familiar places can feel foreign and bizarre. The world takes on a foggy, dreamlike quality. You're driving down a street you've known your whole life, but it suddenly feels like you're in a video game, that the trees are fake props and the other cars are just pixels on a screen. The very fabric of reality feels thin, artificial, and untrustworthy. These experiences aren't psychosis in the same way as hallucinations, but they are profound disturbances in perception. They're common in trauma and anxiety disorders, where the mind, overwhelmed by stress, essentially checks out as a defense mechanism. A clinician listening for these descriptions is looking for clues about overwhelming anxiety or past trauma. So when a clinician asks, "How are your spirits?" or "Have you had any strange experiences lately?" they are gently opening the door to this private, often terrifying sensory world. They are trying to understand the territory, not just the map. They need to know if the cargo is whispering, if phantoms are appearing in the rearview mirror, if the driver feels like a passenger, or if the road itself seems to be made of cardboard. Because you cannot begin to help someone find their way if you don't first understand the world they are actually seeing, hearing, and feeling. We've now examined the engine's performance, the driver's chosen route, the contents of the trunk, and the integrity of the windshield and mirrors. We have a picture of the car and its immediate journey. But what about the driver's core ability to operate the vehicle? How's their memory for the route? Can they pay attention to the road signs? Can they calculate how much fuel they have left? To answer that, we have to look under the hood at the brain's complex dashboard of dials and gauges. We have to assess cognition. So let's pop the hood and take a look. When a clinician assesses cognition, they're not just giving a pop quiz. They are methodically checking the core components of the brain's operating system. Think of it like a master mechanic running a full diagnostic on your car's computer. They're not just checking if the engine turns on, they're checking the fuel mixture, the timing, the electrical system, everything that makes the car actually go. The first and most fundamental gauge on this dashboard is orientation. This is the brain's GPS. It answers the four most basic questions of our existence in any given moment. Who are you? Where are you? What is the date and time? And why are you here? In clinical shorthand, you might hear this called alert and oriented times 4, or ANO times 4. It sounds simple, but a failure on any one of these points is a massive red flag. If a person doesn't know their own name, the GPS is fundamentally offline. If they know their name but think they're at home when they're in a hospital, the location services are malfunctioning. If they think it's 1985, the internal clock is broken. And if they don't understand the situation, why they're talking to a doctor, the system can't even process the purpose of the journey. This isn't about memory, not yet. This is about being grounded in reality. Is the driver even aware they're in a car on a road in the present day? Once we've established that the GPS is online, we need to check the driver's ability to focus on the road ahead. This is attention and concentration. Imagine trying to drive in a hailstorm with the radio blasting, a passenger yelling, and your phone buzzing. Your ability to filter all that out and focus on the white lines on the road is your attention. In an MSE, we test this not by creating a hailstorm, but with tasks that require sustained mental effort. A classic test is serial sevens. The clinician will say, "Can you start at 100 and subtract 7, and keep subtracting 7 from each answer? So 100, 93, 86, 79. It's not a math test. We don't really care if you get every single number right. What we're watching for is the effort. Can you hold the task in your mind? Can you perform the calculation, then hold the new number and apply the rule again and again and again? Do you lose your place? Do you get frustrated and give up? For people who struggle with math, an alternative is asking them to spell the word world backwards. L or O W. Again, the point isn't to win a spelling bee. It's to see if the brain can take a simple, known sequence and manipulate it. It's a mental juggling act. It tests the working memory, the mental scratchpad you use to hold information temporarily while you work on it. A person with impaired concentration might say D or L, or just spell it forwards. This tells us that their focus is drifting. They can't stay in their lane mentally speaking. Now, with the driver oriented and focused, we move to the big one, memory. Memory isn't one thing. It's a whole suite of functions, like a car's trip computer combined with its long-term maintenance log. We start with registration, which is immediate memory. The clinician will say something like, "I'm going to say 3 words. I want you to repeat them back to me right now, and try to remember them because I'll ask you for them again in a few minutes." The words are apple, table, penny. The ability to repeat them back immediately, apple, table, penny, shows that the information has at least made it into the system. The microphone is on. The data has been received. If a person can't even do this, the problem is profound, likely related to attention. They can't remember what they never heard in the first place. But the real test comes 5 minutes later. After discussing other things, the clinician will circle back and ask, "By the way, what were those 3 words I asked you to remember?" This is a test of recent or short-term memory. This is the trip computer. Did the system save the data, or was it immediately deleted? This is one of the most powerful tools for detecting early signs of conditions like Alzheimer's disease or delirium. A person might have a vivid memory of their childhood, but have absolutely no recollection of being given those 3 words just minutes ago. It's like their brain's save button is broken. They can't form new memories. They can tell you all about a trip they took in 1972, but not what they had for breakfast this morning. Finally, we check remote or long-term memory. This is the car's odometer and its permanent logbook. These are the hardened, well-established facts of a person's life and the world. Who was the president before the current one? What were the major world events of your young adulthood? Where did you go to high school? These memories are often the last to fade because the neural pathways are so well worn. When someone starts to have trouble with these, it suggests a much more widespread and severe cognitive issue. Next on the diagnostic checklist is language. This is the car's entire communication system. The dashboard lights, the turn signals, the horn, the radio. Can the driver understand incoming information and express outgoing commands? We test this in several ways. We might point to a watch and ask, "What is this called?" Or to a pin. This tests for anomia, the inability to name objects. We might ask them to repeat a complex phrase like, "No ifs, ands, or buts." This tests their ability to process and replicate intricate grammar. We might give them a 3-step command. Take this piece of paper with your right hand, fold it in half, and place it on the floor. This checks their ability to comprehend and sequence instructions. A problem here, known as aphasia, can be incredibly frustrating for a patient. They know what they want to say, but the connection between the thought and the words is broken, like pressing the horn and having the windshield wipers turn on instead. Finally, we get to the really high-level functions: visuospatial ability and executive functioning. This is the car's advanced navigation and its central command computer. Visuospatial ability is tested by asking someone to draw a clock face and set the hands to a specific time, like 10 past 11. Or we might ask them to copy a complex figure, like 2 interlocking pentagons. This sounds like a simple drawing test, but it is an incredibly complex neurological task. It requires perception, planning, motor execution, and spatial awareness. Can you mentally picture the clock? Can you space the numbers correctly? Can you understand the relationship between the big hand and the little hand? It's the mental equivalent of parallel parking a large truck in a tight city spot. You have to perceive space, plan your movements, and execute them precisely. And that brings us to the very top of the pyramid, executive functioning. This is the CEO of the brain. It's planning, problem-solving, abstract thought, and self-regulation. It's the onboard computer that decides the destination, plots the most efficient route, manages fuel consumption, and adapts to unexpected detours or traffic jams. We test this with questions that require abstract thinking. For example, how are an apple and an orange alike? A concrete answer would be, they're both round. An abstract answer which shows higher executive function would be, they're both fruits. We might also ask for the meaning of a proverb. What do people mean when they say, "Don't cry over spilled milk"? Someone with impaired executive function might give a very literal answer like, "You shouldn't get sad if you knock over your glass of milk." The person with intact function will understand the abstract concept. It means you shouldn't get upset about things that have already happened and you can't change. Each of these cognitive tests, from orientation to abstract thought, is a different sensor feeding data back to the clinician. They aren't just random brain teasers. They are a systematic way of mapping the brain's abilities and deficits. They create a detailed picture of what's working, what's struggling, and what's broken. We've checked the GPS, the driver's focus, the trip computer, the communication systems, and the central planning computer. We have a full diagnostic of the car's onboard systems. But here's the critical question. What happens when all the gauges on the dashboard are flashing red, the engine is smoking, and the GPS is screaming wrong way? But the driver looks you straight in the eye and says, "Everything is perfectly fine. Never been better." What happens when the person being examined has no awareness of these problems at all? That is the crucial and often tragic disconnect between cognition and the next two components we must examine: insight and judgment. Insight and judgment are often discussed together, and for good reason. They are the twin pillars that support our ability to navigate the complexities of life safely and realistically. They represent the bridge between thinking and doing, between knowing and acting. A person can have a perfect memory, a genius-level intellect, and a vast vocabulary, but if their insight and judgment are impaired, they are fundamentally adrift, often in very dangerous waters. Let's start with insight. In a clinical sense, insight is not just self-awareness in a general philosophical way. It's the specific and crucial ability to recognize that one has a problem or an illness, to understand its nature, and to accept the need for treatment. It exists on a spectrum from complete denial to a deep emotional understanding. Imagine a clinician assessing a patient's insight. They're not just looking for a simple yes or no. They're trying to pinpoint where the person falls on this spectrum. At the lowest level, you have complete denial. The clinician might ask, Why do you think your family brought you to the hospital today? The patient, perhaps experiencing florid psychosis, might respond, because they're part of a conspiracy to steal my inventions. There's nothing wrong with me. This isn't stubbornness. It's a genuine inability to perceive their own illness, a condition known as anosognosia. Their brain is literally incapable of recognizing its own malfunction. One step up from that is a slight awareness. The patient might admit that something is wrong, but they'll attribute it to external factors. I know I haven't been sleeping, but it's just stress from my job. Or, yeah, I've been hearing things, but it's because my neighbors are harassing me. They acknowledge the symptom, but they reject the source. They see the smoke, but they refuse to believe there's a fire inside their own house. Then you have what's called intellectual insight. This is a huge step forward, but it can be deceptive. The patient accepts the diagnosis. They can say the words, "I have bipolar disorder," or "I know I have schizophrenia." They can even describe what the illness does and explain why their medication is important. They can talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. It's a knowledge that exists in their head, but it hasn't connected with their heart or their behavior. This is the person who says, "I know I need my lithium to stay stable," and then stops taking it a week later because they feel fine. The understanding is academic, not personal. It hasn't been integrated into their sense of self. The highest level, the goal of so much therapeutic work, is true emotional insight. This is when the patient not only accepts their diagnosis but truly understands, on a deep gut level, how the illness has impacted their life, their relationships, and their future. They don't just know they need treatment, they feel the need for it. They can connect their past behaviors, the arguments, the job losses, the hospitalizations, to the patterns of their illness. It's a profound and often painful realization, but it's also the bedrock of a stable, long-term recovery. It's the moment a person can say, "My depression isn't a weakness, it's an illness. And when I don't manage it, I push away the people I love. That's why I go to therapy and take my medication, even on the days I don't want to." Consider the story of a young woman who believed she was receiving coded messages through the television, instructing her on a secret mission. Her family was terrified. When she was first hospitalized, she had zero insight. She saw the doctors and nurses as enemy agents. Her reality was as solid to her as the floor beneath her feet. Over weeks of treatment, her insight began to slowly, painstakingly emerge. First, she conceded that maybe, just maybe, the stress was getting to her. A few weeks later, she could acknowledge that the doctor's diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder made some sense to explain what she'd been through, but she still felt the medications were unnecessary. This was her intellectual insight phase. The turning point, the dawn of true emotional insight, came months later in a therapy session. With tears in her eyes, she said, "I remember thinking my mother was replaced by a clone. I see the pain I caused her now. The thoughts, they weren't real. And I never want to go back to that place again." That is the power of insight. It's the difference between being a passenger in a car driven by your illness and finally grabbing the steering wheel yourself. But insight alone isn't enough. Knowing you have a problem doesn't guarantee you'll make good decisions about it. That's where judgment comes in. Judgment is the practical application of insight. It's the process of taking in information, weighing options, and making sound, safe, and socially appropriate decisions. It's our executive function in the real world. How does a clinician assess something so complex? It's done through a combination of observation and questioning. They observe the patient's choices. Are they dressed for a blizzard in the middle of July? Are they spending their disability check on lottery tickets the day they receive it? Have they been engaging in risky behaviors, like picking fights or driving recklessly? These actions speak volumes about a person's ability to make safe and logical choices. Clinicians also use hypothetical scenarios to probe judgment. These aren't trick questions. They're designed to reveal a person's thought process. A classic question is, what would you do if you found a stamped, addressed envelope on the sidewalk? The expected logical answer is simple. I'd put it in a mailbox. This shows an understanding of social convention and property. An answer like, I'd open it to see if there was money inside, suggests poor impulse control and a disregard for rules. An answer like, I'd take it to the police because it could be a bomb, might suggest paranoia or disordered thinking. Another common question is, what would you do if you smelled smoke in a crowded movie theater? The answer here reveals the ability to assess risk and act responsibly. The best answer isn't to stand up and scream, "Fire!" That would cause a panic and potentially get people hurt. The best answer is to calmly find an usher or manager, and alert them to the situation, allowing for an orderly and safe response. The person who says they would do nothing, or the person who says they would cause a panic, is demonstrating impaired judgment. Think of an elderly man with early-stage dementia. He may have some intellectual insight. He might tell the doctor, "Yes, I know my memory isn't what it used to be," but his judgment could be catastrophic. This is the man who gives his credit card number to a scammer on the phone who promises him a free cruise. It's the man who decides to repair his own roof in the middle of a thunderstorm. He has the knowledge that his memory is failing, but he lacks the judgment to protect himself from the consequences of that failing. His ability to weigh risk and reward is broken. He can't see the connection between the phone call and the empty bank account, or the slippery roof and the potential for a life-altering fall. Insight and judgment are deeply intertwined. Poor insight almost always leads to poor judgment. If you don't believe you're sick, you won't make the judgment call to take your medicine. But you can also have some insight and still have terrible judgment. A person with a substance use disorder can have perfect, heartbreaking insight into how their addiction is destroying their family, their health, and their career. But in the moment they are faced with a trigger, their judgment is hijacked by the disease, and they make the decision to use again. Ultimately, assessing insight and judgment is about understanding how a person operates in the world. It's about gauging their ability to perceive reality clearly and to make decisions that keep themselves and others safe. These are not character flaws or moral failings. They are cognitive functions, products of a healthy, well-functioning frontal lobe. When they are impaired by mental illness or a brain injury, the foundation of a person's life begins to crumble. Because when insight and judgment fail, the consequences can be devastating. This leads us directly to the single most critical assessment a clinician must make, something that can, without exaggeration, be a matter of life and death. And that assessment is for risk. Specifically, the risk of harm to oneself or to others. This is, without question, the most serious and high-stakes component of the entire mental status examination. We're moving beyond observation and inference into a realm of direct, urgent inquiry where the answers can fundamentally change the course of a person's life in the next few hours. Let's be direct. We're talking about suicide and homicide. These are topics our society often avoids, words we whisper. But in a clinical setting, there is no room for whispering. Ambiguity is dangerous. Euphemisms can be lethal. The clinician's job is to turn on a bright, unflinching light in the darkest corners of a person's mind, not out of morbid curiosity, but with the sole purpose of pulling them back from a ledge. Let's start with risk of harm to self. When a clinician suspects a person might be suicidal, they don't just ask, "Are you suicidal?" and check a box. That's a tragically simplistic view. Instead, they are trying to determine exactly where the person is on a spectrum of risk, a sort of funnel that gets narrower and more dangerous with each step. It often starts with what's called passive suicidal ideation. This is a step beyond just feeling depressed. It's the thought, "I wish I could just go to sleep and not wake up," or "I wish a bus would hit me." Notice, the person isn't planning to do anything. They are expressing a wish for an end to their suffering, a desire to escape the pain, but they aren't the agent of their own death. This is a serious red flag, but it's different from the next step. That next step is active suicidal ideation. This is the thought, "I am thinking about killing myself." The person has now become the potential agent. The thought is no longer a passive wish. It's an active consideration. Once this is on the table, the clinician's questioning has to become even more specific, following that funnel down to its most critical point. The next question is about intent. This is a subtle but crucial distinction. A person can have thoughts of suicide without having the intent to act on them. The clinician might ask, "How strong is your desire to act on these thoughts?" Or a more profound question, "Do you want to die, or do you just want the pain to stop?" For many, the answer is the latter. They don't truly want their life to be over. They want the unbearable psychic agony they're experiencing to end, and suicide feels like the only available option. Identifying this distinction can be the very first step in showing them another way. But if the intent is there, the funnel narrows again. The next question is about a plan. Have you thought about how you would do it? A vague answer like, "I don't know, I haven't really thought about it," is still very serious, but it carries a different level of immediate risk than a specific one. The more detailed the plan, the higher the risk. "Yes, I would use a bottle of pills. Yes, I would go to the bridge on the north side of town." The specificity of a plan, the what, the where, the when, shows that the person has moved from abstract thought to logistical planning. This is an alarm bell ringing at full volume. And that leads to the narrowest, most dangerous point of the funnel, means, does the person have access to the method they've described in their plan? The clinician must ask, do you have those pills in your house right now? Do you own a firearm? Do you have access to what you would need to carry out this plan? If a person has active suicidal ideation, a clear intent to act a specific plan, and the means to execute that plan, they are in a state of acute, imminent crisis. The risk is no longer theoretical. It's immediate. Now you might be thinking, won't asking these direct questions put the idea in someone's head? This is one of the most persistent and dangerous myths about suicide. The answer, backed by decades of research, is an emphatic no. You cannot plant the idea of suicide in someone's mind by asking about it with genuine concern. For the person suffering, they are already living with these thoughts. The thoughts are loud, they are isolating, they are terrifying. When a clinician asks about them directly, it doesn't create the idea. It pierces the isolation. It signals to the person that they are seen, that their pain is being taken seriously, and that this taboo, terrifying subject can finally be brought into the light. More often than not, the patient feels a sense of profound relief. Finally, someone is brave enough to ask. This same rigorous, funnel-down approach applies to assessing the risk of harm to others, or homicidal ideation. The clinician moves from general thoughts of anger or violence towards others, to active ideation, I'm thinking of hurting someone, to intent, to a specific plan, I know who I want to hurt and how, and finally to the means to carry out that plan. But here, there's an added layer of complexity and responsibility. If the clinician determines there is a credible threat to a specific, identifiable person, they may have a legal and ethical obligation known as a duty to warn or duty to protect. This principle was famously established in a landmark case from the 1970s, Tarasoff versus Regents of the University of California. In that case, a student told his university psychologist that he intended to kill a young woman named Tatiana Tarasoff. The psychologist reported it to the campus police, who briefly detained and then released the student. Tragically, no one warned Tatiana herself, and the student later killed her. Her parents sued, and the court's ruling created a new precedent. A mental health professional's duty of confidentiality to their patient ends when the patient's actions pose a clear and present danger to a third party. This places an immense weight on the clinician's shoulders. They must balance their duty to their patient with their duty to protect society. And here is where it all comes full circle. This risk assessment doesn't happen in a vacuum. It is deeply interwoven with every other part of the mental status exam. Think about it. Is the patient's mood profoundly depressed and hopeless? That elevates the risk of suicide. Is their affect flat, showing no emotional response when discussing horrific thoughts? That's a major concern. Are they experiencing psychosis, perhaps command auditory hallucinations telling them to harm themselves or someone else? The risk just skyrocketed. Is their thought process disorganized, making it hard for them to think through consequences? Is their impulse control, which we observed in their motor activity, visibly poor? And most importantly, going back to where we just were, is their insight and judgment impaired? A person who believes their suicidal plan is a logical solution to their problems is demonstrating a profound and dangerous lack of judgment. Each piece of the MSE we've discussed isn't just a separate data point. It's a lens that helps clarify the true nature of the risk. The clinician is a detective gathering clues from the person's speech, mood, thought, and perception, and using all of them to answer the most important question of all. Is this person safe? Right here, right now? The assessment of risk is the moment the MSE transforms from a descriptive tool into a protective one. It's where the abstract observations crystallize into a concrete plan of action. A plan designed to steer a life away from a catastrophic end and back toward the possibility of recovery. We have now examined all the individual components of the mental status examination, from the first impression of appearance to the most critical assessment of risk. We've collected all the pieces of this intricate puzzle, but a pile of puzzle pieces isn't the same as the finished picture. How does a clinician take all this disparate information, the mood, the affect, the thought content, the cognitive function, the risk, and synthesize it into a coherent, meaningful whole? What does that final portrait of a person's mental state actually look like, and what is it used for? That final synthesis, that moment of pulling it all together, is where the mental status examination transforms from a collection of data points into a powerful tool for healing. It's the difference between having a pile of bricks and building a house. Each observation we've discussed, the patient's posture, their tone of voice, the speed of their speech, the themes in their thoughts, their ability to remember 3 simple words, is a single brick. Alone, it tells you something, but its true value is realized only when it's placed in context with all the others. This process of synthesis is called a formulation. It's the story that the clinician constructs to answer the most important question in mental health care. Why this person with this problem at this time? A formulation is not just a summary of the MSE. It's a hypothesis that weaves together the patient's past, their history, traumas, relationships, genetics, with their present, the signs and symptoms observed in the MSE, to create a comprehensive understanding of their suffering. Let's imagine a patient, a 45-year-old man who lost his job 6 months ago. His MSE reveals a mood he describes as hopeless. His affect is flat. His face is a mask, showing no emotion even when discussing his children. His speech is slow and quiet, a struggle to get the words out. His thought process is logical, but the content is consumed by themes of worthlessness and guilt. He believes he's a failure, a burden to his family. His concentration is poor. He can't recall the 3 items we asked him to remember just minutes earlier. And most critically, when asked about self-harm, he admits to having a plan to end his life. Now, we could just list these findings. Flat affect, psychomotor retardation, poor concentration, suicidal ideation. That's the data. But the formulation goes deeper. The clinician synthesizes this. This is a man whose core identity was tied to his role as a provider. The job loss wasn't just a financial blow. It was a profound psychological injury that shattered his sense of self-worth. The MSE findings, the flat affect, the slow speech, the cognitive deficits, are the classic physical manifestations of a severe major depressive episode. His thought content, revolving around guilt and failure, is the psychological engine driving this depression. The hopelessness isn't just a feeling. It's a cognitive distortion born from his current circumstances, filtering his entire perception of reality. His suicidal ideation is the tragic, but logical endpoint of this profound sense of worthlessness and perceived burdensomeness. The depression is so severe it is now impairing his brain's basic hardware, leading to the memory problems we observed. Do you see the difference? The first is a list. The second is a story. It's a story of a human being in immense pain, and it provides a roadmap for how to help. This formulation, this synthesized portrait, is the primary purpose of the MSE. And from it, 2 critical actions emerge: diagnosis and treatment planning. Diagnosis is about pattern recognition. The formulation allows the clinician to see how the individual bricks of the MSE stack up to form the recognizable structure of a specific condition, as outlined in diagnostic manuals like the DSM-5. The flat affect, the hopeless mood, the cognitive impairment, the suicidal thoughts. This specific cluster of symptoms clearly points towards a diagnosis of major depressive disorder severe. The diagnosis isn't just a label for billing insurance. It's a form of clinical shorthand. It gives the clinician a framework, drawing on decades of research about what this condition looks like, its typical course, and what treatments are most effective. It allows them to communicate with other professionals in a common language. But arguably more important than the diagnosis is the treatment plan. The MSE and the resulting formulation don't just tell you what the problem is. They tell you what to do about it. Every single element of the MSE can guide the therapeutic process. For our patient, the finding of active suicidal ideation with a plan makes safety the absolute #1 priority. Before anything else, the clinician must create a safety plan, potentially involving hospitalization, to keep him alive. That single finding from the risk assessment portion of the MSE dictates the immediate course of action. The cognitive deficits, the poor memory and concentration, tell the therapist that this man isn't in a place to engage in complex, abstract psychodynamic therapy right now. He needs concrete, practical, supportive interventions. Therapy sessions will need to be structured, with key points repeated and perhaps even written down. The thought content, filled with self-deprecating beliefs, points directly to the need for cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. The work will be to help him identify, challenge, and reframe those toxic thoughts of being a failure and a burden. The mood and affect findings, the sheer depth of his hopelessness, suggest that psychotherapy alone might not be enough. This is strong evidence to support a discussion about antidepressant medication to help lift his mood enough so that he can even begin to engage in therapy. The MSE provides a baseline. It's a snapshot of a person's mental state on a specific day, at a specific time. And this is crucial because mental states are not static. They change. The true power of the MSE is revealed when it's used over time. It becomes less like a snapshot and more like a time-lapse video. At the next session, the clinician performs the MSE again, perhaps more informally. Is his speech a little faster today? Is there a flicker of a smile when he talks about his daughter? Can he remember 2 of the 3 items instead of 0? Is his suicidal ideation still active, or has it become a passive thought? These small changes, measured by the consistent framework of the MSE, are the vital signs of mental health. They tell the clinician if the treatment is working. If the patient's concentration is improving, it's a sign the medication or therapy is reducing the cognitive load of the depression. If his effect becomes more reactive and congruent, it shows he's beginning to emotionally reconnect with his world. If his suicidal ideation lessens, it shows the immediate risk is decreasing. Conversely, if nothing changes or if things get worse, the MSE provides the objective data needed to say, this approach isn't working. We need to change course. Ultimately, the purpose of the mental status examination is to build a bridge. It is a bridge of understanding from the clinician to the patient. It allows the professional to step, however briefly, into the subjective reality of the person sitting across from them. It translates confusion into clarity, chaos into structure. When you understand through the MSE that a person is experiencing auditory hallucinations, their suspiciousness is no longer seen as resistance, but as a terrifying and logical response to their reality. When you see their thought process is tangential and disorganized, their difficulty in telling a linear story is understood not as avoidance, but as a symptom of their illness. The MSE is a profoundly humanizing tool. It's a systematic method for bearing witness to another person's suffering. It is the foundation upon which a safe, trusting therapeutic relationship is built. It ensures that the person seeking help is truly seen, in all their complexity, not as a label or a diagnosis, but as a whole person struggling with a condition that deserves to be understood and treated with precision, compassion, and skill. Over these 10 parts, we have dissected the human mind through the lens of this remarkable tool. We've seen how a simple observation of a person's clothing, or a casual question about the date, can open a window into their inner world. The mental status examination is the art and science of mental health care combined. It is the process of gathering the scattered pieces of a person's psychological state and assembling them, with care and expertise, into a portrait that not only reveals the nature of their pain, but also illuminates the path toward healing. It is the first and perhaps most critical step on the journey back to oneself,